So it's an honor to be here, and I'd like to kick it over to our Governor, Gavin Newsom.
Thank you all. Mr. Mayor, thank you. Madam Assemblywoman, we're grateful for your leadership and stewardship. Thank you for the opportunity to join you here today. To Joaquin and Wade, and of course, Carla, thank you for your leadership. These are familiar faces. These are the folks that were on the front lines during the last administration, the Brown administration, working through the last drought. And so when we say we have a team of experts, we have a team of experts leading the way, recognizing the urgency of the moment. But we're here to highlight with renewed sense of urgency truly the moment we're in. In the last few years, Wade referenced this, the hydrology in the state has begun to change pretty significantly. The aridification that we're experiencing leads us now, the science and the data leads us to now understand that we will lose 10% of our water supply by 2040. If all things are equal, we will lose an additional 10% of our supply by 2040. As a consequence of that deeper appreciation, that deeper understanding, we have a renewed sense of urgency to address this issue head on. But we do so from a multiplicity of perspectives and ways, not just from a scarcity mindset. And I think so much of the water conservation here in the state, or rather conversation in the state, has been about conservation, has been about a scarcity mindset. But that's a relatively small component of the overall strategy we are introducing here today. What we are focusing on is creating more supply. What we're focused on is creating more water. What we're focusing on are projects exactly like this here in Antioch. And by the way, this project, while it's significant and innovative, is not particularly novel. We have 37 desal projects in this state, not projects, 37 desal plants operating in the state of California. 14 traditional desalinization plants that pull seawater, and 23 programs like this that pull brackish water. While this is innovative, it's innovative for being the first to pull from the Delta and just the second from the Bay. But this technology is much older than I. It's much older than each and every one of you. And the reality is we need to be more creative and we need to be more aggressive in terms of not just promoting this technology, but delivering on its promise, moreover, delivering on its potential. As was noted by the mayor and others, this one project, this simple $100+ million project, $93 million coming from the state of California in loans or direct grants, will provide upwards of 30% of the annual water needs for Antioch. Just this one project, 6 million gallons a day of new water, new supply. Again, moving away from a scarcity mindset to one more of abundance. How can we take the existing resources and be more resourceful in terms of advancing policies and direct our energies to create more water, to capture more water, as Carla was saying? We've talked a lot over the course of the last number of years, a recognition that the hots are getting a lot hotter, the dries are getting a lot drier, and as Wade obliquely mentioned, the wets are getting wetter. What he means by that is these atmospheric rivers that are dumping massive amounts of rain overnight. We designed a system, a world, as Joaquin said, that no longer exists. And as a consequence, we have to adapt to that new reality, and we have to change our approach so we can capture more of that stormwater, capture more of that water before it goes out into traditional sewage and pipes out into the ocean. And that's why we have laid out specific strategies, specific goals with specific timelines and dollar figures attached. It was noted, we put out a master plan for water in July of 2020. That came from an executive order that I signed just a few months after I got elected some 3.5 years ago. It had 142 action items, but we laid out 10 specific highlighted items. On all 10, be it removing the Klamath dams, be it removing our mindset that we can't do more to help the Salton Sea, issues around the Delta is controversial, Mayor, I understand, as they are, but moving from gridlock to at least new strategies and new approaches and floodwaters, as was noted, and the like, we made demonstrable progress. And as a consequence, we said, what more can we do with this deeper recognition of the world now we're living in? And that's what this document represents. This, rather than 142, action items and 140 plus pages is a simple 16-page document that lays out numerical goals in 2030 and 2040 on issues like stormwater capture, on wastewater, on issues related to conjunctive use, on issues related to our groundwater management, SIGMA, that was passed in 2014, on issues as controversial as land repurposing, on water purchases, on conveyance, on issues above and below ground. Remember, storage is not just building 20th century, 15th century, 10th century above ground dams. It's also about capturing that water, pumping that water, and restoring our groundwater basins, addressing the issues of subsidence, and providing a much more cost-efficient approach to addressing the issues of storage. All of those issues are laid out in this new action plan. And so I'm proud of that work. I'm proud of the legislative efforts that have provided us, as was noted, some $8 billion. We didn't go ask you to borrow debt. We're not asking you to pay high interest rates. We're using the surplus, $5.2 billion last year, your surplus, $2.8 billion this year, $8 billion, to actualize, not just promote this plan, to implement its principles. $8 billion, not waiting for the voters, moving these projects and doing them with urgency. And I'll close on this point. There's an urgency and recognition, and it was noted in our tour. The time to get these damn projects is ridiculous. It's absurd. It's reasonably comedic. And in so many of the ways, the world we invented, is from an environmental perspective, is now getting in the way of moving these projects forward so we can address the acuities of Mother Nature. Permits that take years and years and years. And so one of the principles of this plan is our efforts to change our permitting. And we're doing that. We're not talking about that. Our Office of Planning Researchers, one-stop shop, through executive orders and through legislative efforts, including those Assemblywomen will be working with you in the next few weeks to advance before the August recess, will help us fast-track these projects, address the regulatory thickets, and move things forward. So if I'm not appearing to be enthusiastic about this, forgive me. I am enthusiastic about this plan. I'm enthusiastic about the innovation that we are advancing in this plan, but more importantly, a deeper sense of urgency, a mindset of intentionality, a focus on real goals and real deliverables with timeframes and resources attached to those timeframes. All of that said, I want to introduce you to someone that is very familiar to all of you, the former Assembly Speaker, someone who served in multiple, as the mayor said, multiple roles in elected office, notably in a small suburb of Antioch, Los Angeles, as mayor for close to a decade. My friend Antonio Villaraigosa, who is today being formally announced, though he's been informally working with us, but formally announced as our new infrastructure czar in the state of California. And that's a big deal. And let me just briefly tell you why. He's going to introduce himself to you and some of his thoughts on this issue. Money's not our problem anymore, folks. All the money that's floating out there over the course of the last number of years, federal dollars, money's not the issue. It's our ability to attract those dollars by being more aggressive to draw down those dollars, because we have a plan, we have resources, we have grants that we can match in order of drawing down those funds, and we got someone who's going out there and hustling to get it. There's a lot of categorical funding that comes from that infrastructure bill that was signed by the Biden administration, but there is a substantial amount, tens of billions of dollars, that require us to go out and get it. We've got so many leaders and so many agencies going after their part, but no one that's focused on the state, on you, on 40 million Californians strong. So today that changes, and we have someone that not only doesn't need to be introduced to you, but nor is this someone who needs to be introduced to the subject. This is what he did as effectively. I remember running against this guy saying, the one thing I can't run against is how effective he was on drawing down federal funding as mayor of Los Angeles. So we're lucky to have him. I thank California Forward for helping us with this process and allowing us to have this privilege. No further ado, the infrastructure czar in the state of California, former mayor, now czar, Antonio Villaraigosa.
I feel Russian. Thank you, Governor, not only for this appointment. I'm honored to be working with you once again, but also for your plan. This is a plan that is forward-thinking, a plan that is game-changing, a plan that will focus not just on water and all of the ancillary issues, but on jobs, on good middle-class jobs. One of the things and I want to thank Mayor Thorpe. By the way, hablas muy bien el español, huh? I mean, wow. I don't know if you noticed, everybody. Those were big words, technical words, and you speak very, very well. His family's from Mexico, so that's why. It comes with it. So it's great to be here with you as well, and all of the electeds and the cabinet secretaries who are here with us today. You know, folks, what's so important about what we want to do is that, you know, we know this is the biggest effort to invest in infrastructure in our nation's history, or at least since the 1950s. And I could tell you what's critical about it is that we got to make sure that we leverage it. One of the things we were able to do when we made LA the cleanest, greenest port in the world, started to grow and innovate at our airport, build schools, build light rail lines, was invest in middle-class jobs, in apprenticeship programs. We know that with all of this infrastructure, we don't necessarily have all of the talent that we need. We're going to use this to leverage apprenticeship programs. As the governor said so rightfully, look, we got to build this faster, everybody. That means we got to come together. That means we got to work with groups like California Forward, thought leaders who are helping us think through. How do we do that? When we put America Fast Forward together, we said, hey, you have CEQA, and then you get NEPA after that. CEQA's more powerful, more comprehensive, and we were doing it consecutively. And we started doing it concurrently to save money, to save time. That's the kind of thing that we need to look at. As I said, apprenticeship programs. Mayor Steinberg mentioned today, by the way, that we got to be thinking about community colleges and technical jobs. But most importantly, we got to build. We got to invest. And that's what this is out about. And I couldn't be prouder to be here with the governor. Thank you for your confidence. I look forward to working with elected leaders and local leaders. You know, Mayor, I was a mayor, and I used to say the only difference between the mayor of LA and the mayor of Antioch is the size of the stage. We got the same job, the same focus. We're going to be working with your office. We're going to be working with elected leaders all throughout the state to make these investments. You know, when you build infrastructure, it's really about leveraging economic development, and that's what our focus will be, leveraging this to make a greater, better California, where everyone gets a shot at the California and American dream. Thank you very much. Y unas pocas palabras en español, no sé si hay cámaras, pero me forzó, no. Nomás quiero decir gracias al gobernador por este plan de infraestructura, enfocando en agua, pero también en todo lo que es la infraestructura, hablando de aeropuertos y puertos, de trenes urbanos, de las carreteras y más de todo de trabajos de la clase mediana. Eso es critical para nosotros, acelerar los proyectos. Y otra vez, gracias por su confianza, gobernador, and thank you all.
Thank you. So that's a bit of a preview of things to come. Again, I want to just thank members of the Assembly, the Senate, leadership up in Sacramento. Their eyes on the ball. We've got a lot of work to do in the next few weeks to land on some more of the prescriptive details as it relates to aspects and components of this plan. But I think you'll take a look at this plan and see the complementary nature of it compared to the 2020 strategy. But this sense of urgency is real. And I recognize that people of the state of California understand that. and they expect leadership in this space, and we look forward to delivering for them. With that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Governor, thanks for taking the time here. Eitan Wallace with KTXL and Nexstar, and Mayor as well. Thank you very much to both mayors. Got to ask, in terms of what the water will be used for, I saw you sipping that cup of water earlier. Is it drinking water here? And on that note, for our friends down in the Central Valley, Bakersfield, Fresno, Tulare, could you see this similar plant popping up there and helping farmers down there?
Yeah, the challenges with desalinization plants, you need the water to be relatively proximate in terms of your capacity to grant these kinds of programs. That said, conveyance then becomes an option, an opportunity. But here's the big idea. The more we see projects developed like this, the less water that we will be utilizing from traditional conveyance. Less water, for example, in Southern California, coming third of which they receive from the Colorado River, less water that we'll need to pull from the Colorado River. That's why these programs are complementary. This is not the solution to the water crisis, desalinization, but it is a significant part of our effort and our portfolio. And again, I highlight this today because I don't think people fully understand. I have so many people saying, boy, I'm so disappointed we're not doing desal. I said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, they rejected that Huntington Beach site. I said, what about these other 37? They said, I've never heard of those. We've got to do a better job highlighting this, and I think this report helps advance that. And by the way, Coastal Commission has two more smaller desal programs that are in front of them, and I expect to see a different result than what happened a few months back with the Huntington Beach project. But again, desal is one part. Stormwater capture, wastewater capture, one water. Being more abundant in our mindset. There's plenty of water that flows through that just flows right out, that we can reuse, that is high quality, safe, and affordable. And so it's, again, about just being a little bit more resourceful, and that will have an impact in the Central Valley, have an impact in terms of our conveyance on the Central Valley Water Project, State Water Project, have an impact on existing water allocations that are challenged, as you know well, and provide us more capacity to balance the needs as an ag state so that we're not going at each other, urban versus ag.
Governor Jeremy White with Politico, thanks for speaking to us today. You have resisted so far imposing mandatory cutbacks to residential use. You said you wanted to see if people conserved enough. Conservation numbers aren't looking great. Are we getting closer to the point where you might mandate some residential water usage cutbacks?
Well, I appreciate the question because this is an opportunity to reinforce what we've been saying. We have mandates. 450 agencies have moved forward with mandates. They're referred to, and Carla could come up and talk more in the vernacular of her agency, level 2 plans. They were adopted and implemented a few months ago across the spectrum. Local mandated plans, recognizing localism is ultimately determinative, a phrase you hear me often say, but it's profoundly important. Let me give you a specific example. The hydrology, the water conditions up near the Klamath are very different than they are, down in Imperial County. As a consequence, we want to approach and tailor strategies that meet the needs and meet the goals and expectation that the mayor and others are setting out locally. The fact that they're doing this is exactly the spirit of our decentralized strategy and plan and what the level 2 conservation approach is all about. And by the way, that's not my approach. That's an approach that came out of a comprehensive study coming out of the last drought and lessons learned. Perhaps the most important document in water that no one seems to have read, which is what were the lessons we learned through the last 5-year drought. And one of the principal recommendations in that report was do not impose one size fits all because we all operate differently. Now, I've been willing to do that with a caveat. And you know well, Jeremy, we've had 2 high-profile meetings with water agencies and leaders saying, you got to step up your conservation efforts or we will impose these statewide mandates. Here's the good news, and it goes specific to your question. We had a 7.5% reduction, almost 7.6 last month. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I have a little peek into the future. We're going to do a little better next month. We're moving in the right direction. They're eager to do so we don't impose a top-down mandate, but that comes from their local mandates, 10 to 20% to be specific, that exists in 450 water agencies all up and down the state of California.
Governor, thank you.
And Carla is the one that imposed the level 2 components. So let's bring her up. She can talk more about it.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Just to add very little bit, one of the things we speak to extensively in the adaptation plan is the need for permanent reduction in demand of water use, both in our urban areas and both for agriculture, simply because, as Secretary Crowfoot mentioned, and certainly the governor mentioned, all this great weather is actually sucking up water, and we now know those volumes. And so reducing demand in a permanent way is something that all local agencies need to do in California by 2030. If, in fact, this voluntary conservation and or the local mandates, as the governor mentioned, that's where we're seeing the conservation is on the ground, issued by local water districts that issue restrictions and issue their own penalties for water wasters. If that doesn't generate the results that we need, there are permanent demand reductions and approaches to that in this adaptation plan that we would anticipate implementing much sooner. And so we want those water agencies to be successful. This is maybe something of a backstop, if you will. And I do want to make a point of clarification. It's my colleague Joaquin Esquivel at the Water Resources Control Board. That is the entity that pursues these kinds of emergency restrictions. And ultimately, it's a partnership between the Department of Water Resources, the Water Resources Control Board, and our California legislature that sets these new water use efficiencies that results in this permanent demand, both urban and in the separately in the agricultural sector. So, so that's where we are. It's a critical part of our water resilience future.
Thank you for the clarification.
I was trying to spare Joaquin from being accountable here. So I think Carla and I don't want to belabor the point, just very briefly. It's about incentives and a backstop. We're incentivizing, we've been working with these agencies. If we don't see real progress, we have. But if we don't see it continue, we are the backstop. And what Carla said and what this plan lays out is we will be in a position where we will have no choice but to make that imposition across the spectrum. And I can assure you, with maybe an exception or two of all of the leaders of local authorities, they do not want to see that happen. And so we want to continue them to encourage their local efforts so that doesn't need to happen.
Thank you, Governor. A quick follow-up. You're making a late push for environmental legislation here towards the end of session. A couple of the matters you've brought up, those 2045 carbon neutrality targets, setting back wells from homes, have been tried in the legislature and have not made it across the finish line. Why get in now so close to the end of session, and how do you expect to surmount some of the opposition, especially from organized labor that led those bills to die?
I don't know how we're sleeping at night. I mean, anyone paying attention to what's going on? That's the folks up in Siskiyou County, up there in Trinity and Humboldt right now. I mean, the acuity of what's going on, multiple 1,000 a year floods down in the hottest place on planet Earth just last week in Death Valley. I mean, you heard the mayor talk about this 1,200-year flood, or rather 1,200-year drought that exists and persists all over the western United States. I mean, let's wake up to what's going on. And well, I'm very proud of the legislature for providing $53.9 billion. I'll repeat that, $54 billion, which is nation-beating in terms of our climate resilient efforts. We've got to improve our goals. It's exactly what we're doing here with the water program, is we have to recognize the world we're living in and the acuity of the challenge. And so I'm hoping we can dust off those bills, to your question. These are golden oldies. A number of these have persisted in the consciousness of the legislature through executive order, but we need to codify the executive orders through legislative action. And so if not now, when? I mean it. And so I'm so proud of the legislative leaders that afforded me the privilege. A former Assembly Speaker understands this privilege of being able to sit down with both caucuses directly to make an appeal, to say that I'll have your back. And I don't know what more evidence you need. This is a question of which side you're on than the evidence that's being provided on the TV screen every single day up in Sacramento. And that's the big oil companies attacking this effort. I mean, which side are we on, honestly? You're on the side of folks, the biggest profits in history at your expense. They didn't lower gas prices when they're enjoying these kind of profits. Apparently they're going to have even more and higher record profits next quarter. and they're running ads to try to trip this up again. Are we with big oil? Are they really with you and your grandkids? Or are we going to stand up and maintain and reinforce and double down on our leadership? I'd like to think the latter, not the former. That's California, and that's the California way. We're going to get this done.
Tom Bakar, Channel 2, Bay Area. This is a plant built for brackish water, which is to say something much lighter than seawater. And yet with pretty much unchecked sea level rise, with some exceptions in certain nations, the sea level is going to continue to rise. This plant may become early obsolete, and even worse, if it gets much farther up, it goes into the delta, and if it gets to the pumps in Byron, the game is over. And the question is, do we have the time, A, to convert this to something can handle seawater, and more importantly, can we keep that saltwater, seawater, out of Byron?
Yeah, well, we have three experts here. We're talking a lot about this. You've highlighted a lot of this, been a lot of reporting as it relates to seawater incursion now here into the Delta, and I'm going to take advantage of having my three experts, and then I'll follow up with a point of view that's more broad.
Yeah, well, first of all, make no mistake, the changes that we're seeing, these accelerated impacts of climate change, were not anticipated 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So it stands to reason that we're going to have to continue to adapt our approach and our management. And so this strategy that you see here today will adapt over time. We need to ensure that infrastructure, like this infrastructure in Antioch, is resilient to climate change. So as it relates to sea level rise, is it high enough up off the sea level so it avoids getting swamped when the seas rise? To your point, does it actually have the adaptability to desalinate a higher salinity seawater as saltwater comes into the Delta? So those are good questions to ask, and we're ensuring that the investments that the state are making in this infrastructure are climate resilient. Now, as it relates to what you mentioned in the interior Delta, we have 2/3 of Californians that rely on water, snow that falls from Redding down to the mountains east of Bakersfield, and it comes through the Delta. And we need to protect that source of drinking water for Bay Area communities on down to Southern California communities, including our agricultural economy. So we know we have to create and modernize conveyance to be safe against earthquake, because God forbid an earthquake take out these levees, and be resilient to increasing sea level rise and saltwater intrusion. And really that is the primary purpose for the Delta conveyance. Smaller repositioned conveyance that's going to capture these big atmospheric storms that come in the winter and deliver that water to the pumps for export, protecting that fresh water. At the same time, we need to take action to ensure that Delta communities are protected from this saltwater intrusion as well. So while we need to do everything possible to protect the 2/3 of the state's drinking water through conveyance, obviously we need to ensure that the Delta, both as a place to live and as an environment, maintains its health.
People say you're out of bullets on that because there's just no time to do the enormity of work that needs to be done in order to prevent this from happening anyhow.
Yeah, if I could, I'll add to a little bit of what Secretary Crowfoot said, and I really do appreciate the question just here in the Delta and what's happening, what's going to happen in the future with salinity intrusion. And there's a lot of work underway around habitat restoration that helps us manage more proactively, this tidal influence that we know is going to accelerate and get bigger. Already, king tides are bigger, lots of things are bigger when we think about that. So the state does have a plan to put more physical habitat restoration in. The governor and the legislature made important strides on this theme of improving our ability to permit quickly, to address the urgency, for certain projects, to exempt them from CEQA analysis, which is now preventing us from doing all these good things for the environment, like restoration. And those are the things that are starting to get online online much, much quicker. The department did break ground just a month ago on a 3,000 acre tidal marsh restoration project in the northern part of the Delta. We need to do a lot more of that, and the way in which we do it, with strategic partnerships with the private sector, with really clear approaches to getting through permitting faster, those are all the things that are on the table to address these needs that you're expressing. So it's a terrific question. Thank you.
Tom, we're asking ourselves this question across the spectrum every single day. It goes to Jeremy's previous question as well. We need to accelerate our efforts. We need to double down. We need to recognize we can't do what we've done. We need to recognize the urgency. We need to recognize that this paralysis of process is getting in the way of real progress. But, you know, we're not cynical, and we're capable of meeting this moment. And I've said it 100 times. Later is too late, but that starts now. We've got an opportunity today to make decisions and change the conditions of the debate. And that's what this report represents. And I think you'll see a lot of new novel strategies and approaches in this report that also go deep to your question as well.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but it strikes me that the two ways you can do this the most quickly, especially as it relates to water supply, is a pipeline, and I know there's a lot of pushback for pipelines, and the other thing is create a fleet of ships that go up to the Northwest and to Canada, and on a string, just like with container ships, bring water down and backfill until you have it resolved, and then you can get to the other point.
No, well, you're talking about break the glass scenarios, and I assure you, we have some more novel ones than the one you even approached, that are more interesting. But that's for later. We got 400 water agencies that were doing remarkable work. We're going to be amplifying their work, fast-tracking their work. But that break the glass approach, I assure you, none of us are sitting by passively if indeed we need to move in that direction. But right now, we're focusing on these directions with the immediate urgency of the moment.
Good morning, Governor. Matt Bigler, KCBS Radio. Very quickly, we'd like to know if you would like to comment on SB 57, the safe injection
Which one is that?
proposal.
No.
I believe it's on your desk. Are
Thank
you going to?
I just found out yesterday, so I haven't even had a chance to
Okay.
look. Thank you, though, for asking. I've got how many bills you sending me this year? I got like 1,000 of these damn things. I mean, I'm honored to have the chance to review 1,000 bills in the next few weeks, and so the speaker understands this well.
Well, you get the final question from the local newspaper, Antioch Herald, Alan
All
Payton.
right.
But I also have Los Banos Enterprise. So the question today is something going back over 30 years, Governor, and that's the Auburn Dam for more storage of clean water up there.
I think my father used to chain himself to rocks to try to stop the Auburn Dam. You're talking to the wrong guy.
Well,
about
my
that.
father ran for Congress and pushed for the Auburn Dam.
Unbelievable. We were at
against
each other's
George
throat.
Miller.
Okay, against Miller. We were against
92, yeah,
McClintock.
yeah. But it's just
This is a private conversation.
Anyways,
Sorry.
but then as far as the San Luis Reservoir, increasing that, for more water storage, that's one issue. And then also the issue of metering water. And for years, obviously, we've had the meters up here. Now, do all new homes in California, are they required to have water meters throughout the state?
Yeah, in fact, Joaquin is literally, we talk about a metering expert. Let's have him answer that. I'll talk about the storage expansion in a second.
I appreciate the question. Quickly, we're getting to all certainly new development has to be metered, and we're getting to communities that haven't been metered and ensuring, because actually knowing your water use drives conservation. It's incredible how information actually leads to habit changes and permanent changes. So we're also coming into a new generation where we have advanced metering, where you have more real-time data around your water usage in your home, and what it allows is it detects a leak, and you can catch that leak before it's been running for 2 days and wasting hundreds of gallons of water and costing you tons as well. So it's an exciting time for metering. Thanks for the question.
Good.
And for what it's worth, metering data, water rights issues, all laid out in components of this plan. Also strategies specific around just more traditional mechanisms to address the issues of irrigation and replacing turf. We have some numeric goals related to that. Numeric, not just in terms of total number of acres, but also monetary investments that we need to make in that place. As it relates to the expansion, I think it's an opportunity even beyond just the expansion of that storage facility to talk briefly. We have a bond that you passed a number of years ago, $2.7 billion bond. 7 storage projects were part of that bond. This comes up over and over again. What's the status of those dollars? 4 of them are groundwater storage projects, and 3 of them are either expansions or new, like the Sites Reservoir, new dams. We are moving with timelines in this plan. You will see the permitting, the environmental, and dates certain as it relates to moving those projects forward. We have reorganized our teams around delivering on those projects for no other reason than this: 2.77 million acre feet. What does that mean? That means basically the equivalent of 3x the current storage capacity at Folsom that are component parts of those 7 projects. If I've lost you, you were listening. If I didn't lose you, you weren't paying attention, except to say we recognize that critique in the past. It goes to the issue of permitting. It goes to the issue of being more resourceful. And it also goes to the issues that we laid out here. There are 112 dams in this plan that we've identified for improvement and needs. We identified last year $100 million as a down payment to begin to address some of their seismic concerns and the deferred maintenance. We are identifying additional resources to also address that backfill in terms of repairs and maintenance. And of course, because you are the last question, this is also an opportunity to highlight Antonio Villaraigosa's work, because his job is to draw down these federal resources in that space and other spaces for projects like that that are ready to go, that will need some federal gap money to close and fulfill the promises that have been made.
Saltwater intrusion in the Delta. I saw that in the late 1800s, they were concerned about saltwater intrusion in the Delta, which was interesting to see. I had no idea it's been going on that long.
No, everything that's new is old. Everything's old is new. And past prologue, I mean, we could spend 20 minutes on all kinds of ways of saying the same damn thing, except to say this: we can't do the same damn thing anymore. And I think all of us recognize that. And it goes to the spirit of everybody's questions and anxiety. But I hope in closing, and just briefly, 30 seconds, what I really want to impress upon you today, and if I haven't been effective enough, I'm going to try in this close, that we're so deeply anxious because we've been consistently in the scarcity mindset, that it's about reduction and people feel like they've done enough. A lot of folks really do feel they've done enough, and a lot have done a lot more than others. We've got to move away from that mindset, because there's a lot more abundance out there if we're more creative in terms of how we approach things. In looking at the opportunities for desalinization is just one of many. Stormwater capture, capturing these big flows. We did some analysis of the amount of flows that came from those atmospheric rivers in November and December of last year. And if we had the tools and the conveyance and the infrastructure to capture that stormwater, it's the equivalent of those 7 projects that I just noted that take decades to build in terms of stored capacity. So I'm a little more optimistic than most. And I say that deeply enmeshed in all of this. And I want folks to leave with that thought. We'll work through this. Mother Nature is still bountiful, but she's not operating like she did 50 years ago. Hell, she's now operating like she did 10 years ago. And we have to reconcile that. And we had a vision in the 50s and 60s to do just that. And we want to reinvigorate that capacity in California. And that's really what today's press conference is about, what Antonio Villaraigosa's leadership will, I'm confident, represent, and what you expect and 40 million Californians demand. Thank you all very much for being out here today.